I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling, but out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi everyone, welcome back to Outside the Therapy Room. Today we are joined by Destinee. It's been a while.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me join again.
Yes, this is very exciting, the topic that we're discussing today. And I thought you would be the perfect person to talk about it because we all know that, respectfully, you are a video game nerd.
Yes.
And you really enjoy video games. Mm-hmm. And we are talking about video games today and the impact that they have on our mental health. And I'm actually really excited about this subject also because I have 3 boys at home and my youngest 2 during the holiday break have been playing a lot of video games, and It's been a lot of fun in our house, just cheering each other on for it. So I'm excited for this topic.
Me too. I think in terms of thinking about identity, one thing I love about how I see myself is that of a big nerd. Video games, board games, it's a big part of what I love about me. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited to dive into this a little bit more.
Yeah. And especially like bringing in some therapy perspective into it too. I feel like we could just have a podcast all about video games. Yeah. So we're going to try to condense it and keep it short and sweet and maybe revisit it at a later time. But as we were preparing for this episode, we were talking a little bit about how video games and mental health were talked about when we were younger and we were growing up. And there was a lot of negativity around video games, about it being dangerous or, playing violent video games can lead to violent individuals and all of these things. And so maybe we could start there, kind of just the history of our experience with video games.
Yeah, well, for me, so being raised with 3 brothers, video games were kind of always part of the picture. We had like the very early Nintendo 64, eventually got an Xbox. So being exposed to a wide range of different games, and that was a way of bonding for us. But there was definitely, like, with my parents not knowing what the limitations or caps were on it, so trying to monitor what we were actually playing. Like, we even had old school, like, James Bond, GoldenEye going on. So, like, those shooters, right? And for me, at that time in the 90s, growing up with these games, I actually didn't have a lot of female friends who were also big into gaming. It was seen more as like a boys' club kind of thing. So I remember almost growing up and having to try to prove myself to my peers, especially my male peers, that I also like to play games. So that was kind of like a negative experience for me growing up, not finding a lot of other females that also enjoyed gaming. Because it was such a bonding thing for me and my brothers that it became almost integral again to my identity. So it was a little bit isolating for me with trying to find that community outside of the home when it came to gaming. But also like a lot of the stigma around it. Like a lot of friends that didn't understand gaming saw it as like a very aggressive, violent activity. When in actuality, that wasn't at all part of wasn't the main element that I saw from when I enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. I think we relate with our brothers. I also had 2 younger brothers, and so there was a lot of gaming that was happening at our house. We had the Nintendo 64. We had the old school Nintendo that we would have to blow on the thing to make sure it worked. And it was super pixelated. But that was something that we would do, and that was a way that we would connect with each other at the house. And it was something that all 3 of us could actually do. And given our age difference and them being twins and kind of obviously wanting to hang out with each other more than they wanted to hang out with their older sister, that was something that kind of brought us together. And I guess my experience was different because I did always kind of, in my community outside of the home, I still gravitated a little bit more towards guys. It was the club. So they would teach me, and I didn't know too much about like computer gaming. Like I'm thinking more of, I can't say it.
World of Warcraft.
Thank you. It's like a tongue twister. That like they would try to like teach me that, and sometimes I would be into it and sometimes I wouldn't. But I would agree with the female friends that I would have. There was maybe a little bit of like, why are you doing that? And like seeing it more as that kind of boys club But yeah, what kind of games did you enjoy when you were growing up?
I was really big into all the Zelda games, like the
Yeah.
OG Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. Those are like still some of my favorite games, and that like involves adventure, storytelling, a lot of puzzle solving,
Mm-hmm.
some combat.
Mm-hmm.
But like that classic narrative trope of like the hero coming in and helping to save like the princess or help save the situation.
Yeah.
So really enjoyed those kind of games. Also love like the classics again, like Mario Party, Mario
Oh, I
Kart.
love
Those
Mario Party.
my brothers and I had to create a rule when we play Mario Party because we still enjoy it to this day
Yeah.
together that we cannot steal stars from each other because if we do, we will hate it and we will never play anymore.
Right.
That's the only way we'll still consistently play the game.
Boundaries.
We've learned boundaries when it
Yeah.
comes to playing with each other because we get very competitive
Yeah.
and we don't want the competitiveness to ruin the fun.
Yeah.
How about you? What kind of games did you play growing up?
Same. We had a lot of Super Mario Brothers. We did some of the Mario Party, and then I think there was like a Pokemon style, like Mario Party kind of theme, but with Pokemon. So there was a lot of those mini games and stuff. We really enjoyed that. I was huge into driving games,
Oh,
so
yes.
like racing games. So we had like Burnout, I think it was called Burnout, and a couple other games like that that were for me. And then like when as we got older, we had Guitar Hero and a lot of like those games which were so fun. But my brothers were really into like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, like a lot of those. And I remember at the time, like my parents were like, "Oh my God, it's violent. It's teaching you to steal," like all of these things. And my brothers would like try to convince them that it was fine. But there was a lot of like that negativity though. No, maybe not negativity, but a very negative focus on video games at that time.
Yeah, like a lot of those more violence or like being raised on Halo or
Yes. Oh,
where
Halo was big at our house. I can't play it. I'm not good. I am not good at the moving straight and then like looking around. That's not something I'm good at. And I could get really dizzy in those games.
yes.
So I wouldn't really watch, but that was big at our house with my brothers. But yeah, there was a lot of that negative, like more caution towards those games for parents. And there was always those disclaimers of making sure that, you know, it was for a mature audience, all of
Yes.
those things. And I think even through I don't know about you, but I know in my studies, as I was going into the field of social work and psychology, there was a lot of conversations around video game addiction.
Yeah, I remember learning a little bit more about, especially in undergrad and grad school, there's a bit more talk about like different elements of things that weren't helpful. And I think actually the DSM has like a diagnosis when it comes to like way more of like a severe or intense engagement with video game or video game addiction or internet gaming disorder.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, internet gaming disorder or IGD is sometimes used interchangeably with the term video game addiction. But for some gamers, gaming can become problematic and negatively impact their lives. And those folks can develop a behavioral addiction to playing video games that gets in the way of their functioning. So video games can be very, like, they pull you in, right? You're in this world, and sometimes when we're too into that, we lose the ability to recognize our body's cues. So our cues to go to the washroom, our hunger cues, our tiredness, sleepy cues, our need to like gain social interaction or get our bodies out and moving and like spend time outdoors, and all of those things can sometimes just shut off the alerts from our body because we're so focused and kind of into this world that we are playing in.
Yeah, and even like to go so far too as like with the brain chemistry where certain games activate that dopamine.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to walk away from getting that consistent dopamine hits. And again, this is like way more of an extreme variation of what gaming, what it can look like in someone's life. So this is not everyone's experience. But we can see how it can be viewed in way more, it can become way more of a negative in one's life.
Yes.
And outside of that too, even like going against like what you're saying about becoming so absorbed in this world, we can see how for some people they use gaming as a way to escape, as a way to get away and completely avoid issues in their life, and detach from reality, which, you know, in small bouts, that's not a terrible thing.
Yeah.
We need distraction. But if we become solely invested in another world to help us, you know, completely avoid other elements of our life, that's where we find that we're not living in a healthy way there.
Yeah. And I think, like everything, too much of something can be really harmful. And that's why there's an importance in the reflection and self-awareness and acknowledgement that maybe we need to take a little bit of a break. But as we're kind of in this topic of video games maybe being unhealthy for us, there was a lot, again, when I was growing up, there was a lot on like increased aggression, and there was a lot on, I think there was a lot of studies being done on, you know, individuals who maybe were being arrested for, different crimes like that, that would kind of illustrate their video game involvement and what kind of games they were playing. And so, yes, obviously, like games that are violent in nature that require, you know, players to kill or attack or hunt different characters, like, yes, there can be some aggression that comes from that. I think also the one thing I mentioned was like disturbed sleep. If we're too involved in our game, and I sometimes like to end things at like a nice ending point, and sometimes in a game it takes quite a while to get to like this point in the story where it's okay to pause.
Yes.
And so like you kind of are in it, and that can interrupt your sleep. And so then you're playing and you're kind of, you know, just in this world, in this game, and you're not listening to your sleep cues.
And then it's like it's 2 or 3 in the morning and you're still trying to beat that boss and you can't. And like for me, hunger, if I get so into a game like for hours, sometimes I am maybe slower to recognize the hunger cues, or if I do, it's almost like, but I don't want to have to get up and leave because I'm so enthralled in this right now. And I am definitely a classic hangry person. So if I don't get enough food into my system, I am way more leaning towards that frustrated, annoyed space. But kind of like what you're saying, trying to find that balance of be able to enjoy something without it completely overriding, where then this becomes the main focus and we ignore all other parts of ourselves.
Yeah. And I think like that's why the, you know, socialization, social anxiety, we see a lot of that in like in the media. We hear a lot about it. You know, they were so socially isolated. They're like too much into video games. We hear that all the time. But that is, again, like when we are not paying attention and setting those boundaries for ourselves, that is something that it can go in. And at the time, yes, it can be helpful and benefiting, which we're going to get to in a second. But staying too long in that can really kind of, you know, break those natural things that we're needing, like community connection, time outside, all of those things we talked about already.
Exactly. And even like another element that can add to the unhealthy part about gaming, especially online gaming, like depending on the environment that we're involved in. I know there's a few games that are kind of notorious for having some very toxic environments. League of Legends. That's something that I've, over the past few years, I don't know how it is now, but I know that it's in the past has been viewed as a very negative. People can be really mean.
Like community involvement,
because it's team based, and so if you're not pulling your weight or doing well, people can be really mean to you. And I know also, like, this is aging me, but back to, like, Halo and Halo 2 days, back in, like, Xbox Live.
Yeah.
Also very toxic in terms of players and just saying very, like, misogynistic things and, like, using the mic. So people aren't just texting. They're also, like, saying these things in a voice chat. And that can be very negative and hurtful to someone's, like, self-esteem and their identity. So depending on what video game realms that we're in, we can find that there's some very amazing, positive, beautiful ones that are very connecting and validating, but then there are others that can just be really harmful. So it's being cautious about setting down boundaries and how much we can get ourselves involved in some of those environments.
Yeah. Speaking in that, like, how did you find it as a female gamer in those communities? Like, I'm hoping that there was some kindness in there, but what was your experience with that?
So I made the classic mistake of having my gamer tag have it known that I'm a female player, and so because of that, I would never really use a mic when I played. But you can still hear other people's mics if you I'm playing Halo, so I end up doing well in my part of the team, but they can hear the other team talking for a quick second, and then they'll see your name and they'll make a sexist comment, like go back to the kitchen or go make me a sandwich, stuff like that. Which is not great.
Yeah.
And I think I try to do a lot of inviting empathy to males in my life about at that time how negative people could be online. So actually, my younger brother, he gamed on my account and he didn't use the mic, but he was just playing on it when I wasn't around just to see what it was like. And he told me, because he's also very good at gaming, that he got so many negative comments from people because he'd be doing well and they didn't like the fact that he was presenting as a female character.
Right.
And so they would make it known to him and use a lot of very sexist terminology. And I think that helped him better understand how, and this is, I'm talking like 10, 20 years ago, how at that point it was pretty bad and for the female gaming community. And then you get like the random people that would send you a message being like, are you really a girl? It's like, yeah. And then they send you a friend request just because you're a female.
Yeah.
So I think things have definitely changed since then. But yeah, growing up, I found it very hard in that way.
Yeah. I'm even thinking like in media, we've seen that in, I always revert back to shows and movies, but we've seen that. Like I don't know what movie it is. Maybe I'm making it up, but I can remember that there was a male character in a game, and at the end of that game, they learned that the person controlling this character was female, and there was a lot of no way, or I can't believe I lost to a girl. Like all of these comments that are not very kind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sure it's unfortunately common for a lot of female gamers at that time. And I'm hopeful that maybe now it's a little bit different. Like I'm hoping.
Well, even like if we look a little bit at the history of gaming, like games were made by men geared towards men or males, and I'm talking like many decades ago here. Things have very much changed since then. We see such a range of games meant for all ages, for various populations, like those cozy sim games or puzzle games, things that can tailor to a lot of different interests. And so I think that starting off, things weren't in the most open realm, but now things have really changed.
Yeah. Yeah, well, even then, right? Like Halo would be more geared towards men, and then Sims, like the game Sims, would be geared more towards females, and that's again conversation all on its own. But yeah, I'm also remembering the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And in that book, you do kind of get to hear a female's perspective as a game developer in that world and how she felt. It's a great book. I recommend you read it, especially if you love video games, but also if you don't. It's such a good book. But it is kind of interesting to hear that female's perspective in the developing world, in the games that she's creating. And so, and in that environment, kind of working in a maybe more male populated field. But yeah, hopeful that things are a little bit better now.
Yeah, and even to jump on like the book, there's also a show called Halt and Catch Fire that came out on AMC a long time ago. And again, it talked more about the evolution of the computer and laptops, but there's a female coder in it and how she starts to create her own game and just, again, trying to fight for space for her as a female to take up in this male-dominated realm.
Yeah.
But again, we see like a lot of positive changes through that over the past like few decades.
So now as we're moving into maybe some of the positive effects of video game, like what are some of the positives that you feel when you're gaming?
So many like positive benefits and amazing things about gaming that I might lose track here. But one thing that stands out for me, it also depends on what kind of games you like to play and what you gravitate towards. So some games that I like to play are called role-playing games or RPGs. And I find these games can be such a safe avenue to express yourself and your identity. Where for some people they can create characters like physically, but also like their personality, even assign like pronouns and such, and really create people and characters that can allow them to find other variations themselves, where they can be the hero in the game, can also almost give hope that they can be the hero in their own story in the real world. And so I love games that allow to safely express yourself. And I know for some people too, like having games where, especially like the trans community, trying to find what feels right and be able to play around where your pronouns are respected and validated in this fictional world, that can help give hope and encouragement that now I can transfer it here into the real world, into my own life. And also a little bit too, and like that can be very validating, and create a bit more safety to become more authentically yourself. But also like with RPGs, and I might stray a little bit to like other games like D&D, games where you create your own character. I know for some folks, they actually might create a character who have like a flaw or a fear that they also have themselves. And then they learn through gaming, through their character, how to combat or navigate that flaw or that fear, which gives them a lot of like encouragement that they themselves can do that too. So there's a lot of parallel processing that can happen in gaming versus in your own world.
And as you're talking about D&D, I'm remembering that Community episode where they help somebody if you've watched Community, I think it's in the last season, but they do play D&D with that in mind, to try to build this character's self-esteem and to help them find the positives that they have. And so it's definitely, although I haven't actually personally played D&D, but I help my brother, he's a dungeon master, giving him some like ideas for something. I had a client that spoke to me about playing that and how they felt when they were playing with this character that they had created. And so we did focus a couple of sessions on how that felt and how that transferred into their own lives. So it can definitely be something that you can kind of learn the skills or feel that bravery because of that safety that you had in this like virtual world that can then help you in the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I also think during the pandemic, we definitely heard so much about connecting through gaming. I saw on social media, I saw so many people participating in like Mario Kart racing with family members in their own bubble, and just playing a lot of online games to kind of continue that sense of community during a time where we were all isolated. But there was also a huge, I mean, maybe you'll be able to correct me on this, but from the people that I heard, there was such a huge, I guess, excitement over Animal Crossing and creating a world that the pandemic didn't exist, that it could be safe, that they could, engage with other people and again, build that sense of community.
Yeah, and I think because Animal Crossing's been a game that's been around for a long time. But I think what made this one different, and I could be wrong because I didn't grow up with Animal Crossing, was that you could actually like play online with friends and visit each other's islands and show off things. And so definitely that fostering connection where we're all forced to bunker down during the pandemic and be alone in our space, where it was like a safe way to cross that border and connect with other people. So I know Animal Crossing really blew up around the pandemic. So I think it also released around the same time that things were shutting down.
I think it also gave like a safe space of control, because during the pandemic we felt like we had no control over the situation. It was really scary. And in these worlds, we could have control in how we wanted our island to look like, what kind of decoration we wanted, and like, again, build off of that community. But it didn't give us a sense of control in a moment where we felt very powerless.
And that's a great way to help manage like stress and anxiety.
For sure.
Finding areas of control. Like there's even a type of gaming style or a genre called choices matter games, where with these games you decide what happens in a story, where you're presented with different options and that molds what happens next and where the story goes. And with these kind of games, like they can help us feel like we're more in the driver's seat of what's going on. And especially I think during the pandemic, a lot of us lost that sense of control.
Yeah.
And so playing different games, like some classic Choices Matter games, like the Telltale game series, like The Wolf Among Us, or I know they did like a Batman variation, or other ones that you can choose where the story goes, and it feels like what you choose to do is really important and matters. And again, that can be really validating.
Yeah.
That I'm not just helpless and I can't do things. I also have some power in this world here. And that can, again, give us hope and be really encouraging.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as like we're speaking about, the positives of video gaming, I think I asked my kiddos because, okay, the big games at our house right now, we have like a PS5, and we already finished Spider-Man 2, but now my youngest, who is 6, is wanting to try to do it on his own. And then my oldest is still challenging through The Legends of Zelda on the Switch. So I asked my kiddos what was helpful about video games, or, the positives about video games. And they both mentioned problem solving and decision making. My oldest can have a hard time making decisions. And in video games, you kind of have to, on the spot, make those decisions. And sometimes that's a struggle for him, but he knows that it's okay if he makes the decision that doesn't work out. He gets to restart and he gets to go back to that place, right? So for that, I think from what they said, I'm making an assumption that in that case, it can be helpful to kind of have that freedom to make those decisions and feel confident about the decisions that you're going to make. And with problem solving, a lot of these games, you do have to problem solve. Like you mentioned, there's puzzles. You need to work together if you're playing multiplayer or if you're playing online. You have to figure things out together. And I think video games can be a great opportunity to learn healthy communication. If you're yelling at each other, that's probably not going to lead you to, complete that level or complete that task that you have to do in the best way. And so really learning how to communicate and work well together is really helpful. I actually had a couple who were huge gamers, and they mentioned playing games a lot at the end of the day once kiddos were asleep, and they had shared, or I had encouraged them to just check on how they communicate while they're playing the game. And that was one of our goals for their relationship, was communication. So I'm like, you are already in this field, right? Like you're already playing this game. Just try to know how do you communicate in this game? How do you get to your goal that you have in this game particularly? And there was a lot of positives that came from that. Like, I'm more patient with them in this game, or I get really triggered and frustrated, and sometimes I want to grab the control from them and do it for their character. And so being able to kind of recognize like some of the communication that can happen in those games, I think it's a good kind of way to acknowledge maybe areas that you can work on or that can really help with communication.
Yes. Oh, 100%. A lot of games that are like co-op games. You have to collaboratively work together. My spouse and I, we love these kind of games. So some like It Takes Two, where it's like a game about this couple who they're struggling in their marriage. But they're kind of thrown into this world where now they have to work together to return back home and be reunited with their daughter. And so the game is split screen, so you can actually see what's going on the other player's screen.
Right.
Which, you want to make sure they don't do too much backseat gaming for your companion.
Yeah.
But it can be a really fun way where there's a lot of communicative elements to it, where you have to work together. Or my partner and I were playing another game. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like you're these two men who meet in prison and you're trying to escape. And so there are some elements of teamwork where, I have to distract this guy while you go do this task. And so we're kind of like, having to communicate who's doing what when.
Yeah.
But another classic game, I don't know if you've heard this one, Yvonne, it's on PC. It's called Keep Talking and No One Explodes. And it's a game where one person on their computer, they have a bomb in front of them that they have to defuse. And there's another player who they can't look at the screen, but they have a manual. And so now the person looking at the bomb has to describe what they're seeing to the person with the manual. And the manual has to or the person with the manual has to go through and ask them questions to figure out which wire to cut, which button to push.
Oh, wow.
So it's all about focused communication, like clear. We don't want to escalate too much, even though these are some pretty tense situations.
Yeah.
But they're such great exercises in communication of communicating clearly, feeling heard, and being able to collaborate on achieving goals.
Yeah. And also knowing when to ask questions, when, like, managing your emotions and your
Yes.
frustration through these tense situations. And
Mm-hmm.
that game in particularly reminds me of an activity that I sometimes use with couples where they'd go back to back and one person has an image full of shapes and they have to kind of guide them through creating the same
Mm.
image, but they can't see it. And they only have like an allotted opportunity to ask questions, or the
Oh.
first time they might not be able to ask any questions. They just have to listen and see how well they can listen. Like it's really cool to kind of see these, games that you have that can really help with some of those important, things like communication, problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
creativity, like decision
Yep.
making, all of those things. And it's done in a safe place where, yes, although it feels like there's a lot to lose because you don't want to like not get through the game
Yep.
or have to start at the beginning, but it is in a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, going back to our very first episode where we talked about fear,
Yeah.
sometimes knowing that you're in a safe space, but you're feeling the fear, the anxiety, there's some relief in it because okay, I'm feeling this, but I'm still in it. This is a video game,
Yes.
right? There's not too much I'm going to lose besides
Mm-hmm.
maybe really wanting to win this game and the time
Yes.
I've put into this, but really like I can still do this again. I can restart this game
Yeah.
if I need to. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually a genre of games that my friends and I love to play together online. A lot of those
Yeah.
like co-op horror games, like
Yeah.
Lethal Company, or like Phasmophobia or Content Warning. These games where you can work collaboratively to help reach the goal, and there's a lot of those spooks elements involved. Where
Yeah.
again, a safe way to feel fear and enjoy it, but knowing that ultimately, the worst case scenario is we might have to restart that level, or
Right.
we do get back further than we would have liked, but it's okay. Like nothing else outside that has changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to kind of connect back to like collaboration and connection, I know for a lot of people who like enjoy gaming, they may not actually game themselves, but they like to watch other people play games. There's so many people on Twitch, on YouTube that do
Yes.
Let's Plays, and they stream themselves playing games. And oftentimes, if they're streaming it online and talking to like their community, like you can be really involved with the streamer, and there's some out there that will like listen to what their community has to say and help guide them in making decisions in games.
Yeah.
And that can be such a great way to feel connected to other people through gaming. Also a safe way where if people can't financially afford to play video games, because it can be pretty expensive,
Yeah.
it's a great way to still enjoy the story and connect with other people, by just observing and watching.
And still feeling involved in it, that you can provide support to the person that's playing the game. I am one of those people.
Oh, yeah?
But sometimes I'm annoying because I'm
You're
like
the backseat gamer?
I'm the backseat gamer. Oh my god, do this. That person's there. And then Sam will be like, that person is like, we don't need to worry about that person. They're just there. So I'm like, oh, okay. Oops. So maybe I'll just be quiet and just watch. But it can really feel like, you are getting this community together. And as we are talking about YouTube and Twitch and all of these other online streaming places where video games are happening, it has become such a huge community, and there is a lot of female gamers on there as well, which hopefully, again, all of those young female gamers are having somebody that they can connect with and relate to. But my boys really like watching that. And sometimes when like Sam has been playing the Spider-Man 2 game the first time, there were some levels that they couldn't beat, right? Like all three of them were like trying, and my son's like, let's watch it on YouTube and at least have an idea as to what direction we need to go in.
Yeah.
And so he popped it on the level that they had, and then they're like, oh, okay, we need to do this. And then that helped them. And so there is, again, that community effect of, I know I can go to this, I guess, video game influencer to figure out what next steps I need to do in this game. So yeah, it's kind of cool community.
And even to go into that, like I know Discord has become like a huge online social platform.
Yeah.
Where it was meant specifically for gamers to like be able to chat and voice calls, to be able to share their screen and stream to friends and connect. But now I have like university student clients that they schools have Discord servers now, and you can like find people that way.
That's so cool.
And one thing I like, because I do also enjoy a lot of single player games. But there's a lot of Discord servers for those games. So, even though I'm not connecting with people in the game per se, I can probably find a server for it online and meet other people who are just as enthusiastic about this game. And then we can bond and talk and like share our theories and share screenshots of our game and our characters. And that can still be a really cool way of connecting.
For sure. And creating that community.
Yes.
I think, again, with gamers, or with us playing games, I should say, there can be a stress and anxiety relief element to it, depending on the games that we are playing. Some of them can heighten our anxiety and stress in that moment.
Like those horror games?
Like those horror games, or the ones that are like time limited. I'm imagining that one with the bomb diffusing, like that would naturally create that anxiety and adrenaline in our bodies. But I think some games can also really help with stress and anxiety relief. Like we mentioned, right? Animal Crossing, that can be a stress and anxiety relief game. For me, I really enjoy Mario Party, like just playing like the random mini games, or even doing some of the game board ones. Like, it is fun and it's distracting and it's enjoyable, and we're doing some fun things together as a family, and so it does help with that stress and anxiety relief. And even Super Smash Brothers, which like it's so fun, and it can be stress inducing, but sometimes it is that stress and anxiety relief, especially how my boys play, because they're standing and they're like actively like moving their bodies, and they feel so happy when they're done. And it can be like just, a way to safely and in a healthy way express some of the anger and frustration or stress that we're experiencing, right? No one is actually getting harmed, but we can feel that by, controlling this character and, winning the fight, that we are in some ways relieving some of that aggression or anger that we have in us.
Yeah. Like there are other types of games that are meant focusing on just relaxing. And some of these, we call them like the cozy farming sim games.
Yes.
Where this is like the classic Stardew Valley, where you're just playing a farmer, and all you do every day is just choose to farm or fish, or go into the mines. You can talk to like the villagers. Like the game is a very just calm, relaxing tone. And there's like a whole plethora of other games like Coral Island, Luma Island, Ooblets, different things that like the focus is just to exist and be, collect things. And there's no rushed or stressful agenda of like, I have to like defeat this boss, or it helps. I think there's actually research that was done that Stardew specifically has been seen to help bring down stress for a lot of people if they could play it for a little bit. Even like silly games too. I know one silly game my friends and I like to play, something called Golf with Your Friends, where you're just mini golfing, but you're the ball.
You're
like,
the ball.
You're the ball, and you can have like little silly like cosmetics, little hats and such for the ball. And it's just with chill music. There's no pressure. Again, some of the competitiveness can come out.
Sure.
But the goal of the game is just to have fun and to connect. And I think that is a good reminder that not all games are like the pew pew shooties. Like, we have to master the skill. Some of it is just for connection, or just for fun, or just to bring down stress.
Yeah.
And there's so many variations of them out right now that for like PC, for consoles, that it gives a lot of range for people to choose from.
Yeah, and I think that's an opportunity for creativity too, right? Like I'm remembering like Sims, or there was even, I don't remember the name, but you would create like an amusement park.
Oh, Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Yeah, like in those, right? Like you're kind of focused, you're creating, you're, using that part of your brain that feels like you're accomplishing something by the end of you creating this thing. And so that can definitely be a great way to kind of have that stress and anxiety relief. And bringing up the book Tomorrow, like in there is a game that a character creates after experiencing a huge trauma, where it was very much like being a farmer, being in this place, doing normal day-to-day things, going to the library, going to learn music class, but all of this is being done in the game. And there was a sense of like relief and coping that this character was feeling after experiencing this trauma. So yeah, yeah.
And I like how games are multi-layered, where they can address a lot of serious issues and touch on a lot of emotions that are just human. Like there are quite a few games that go into processing big emotions.
Yeah.
For example, grief and loss, things that are complicated, that are hard to put into words. There are some really, I'd almost say healing kind of games that address that with like the music and the art style. Games like Spiritfarer or Gris. I'd even say the game Ori and the Blind Forest. These are all different games that address like a sense of loss or even saying goodbye to characters. And I have definitely shed tears while playing games. I can easily admit that.
Yeah.
But it can be such a cathartic experience because some of these emotions can feel very isolating, as though we're the only one that feels it. And to be able to experience that in a safe way in a video game can be that reminder that this is part of the human condition. And there's nothing wrong with experiencing and feeling what we're feeling.
And sometimes when we are the ones in our real lives experiencing that sense of grief, sometimes it's it's stuck, like we can't process the feeling. So I'm imagining playing a game like that where it is happening to a character. There's a little bit of distance in it, but you can still process the emotions that you yourself may be feeling, but maybe are suppressing in that moment. And so they can be really like games where you are able to express, able to identify, able to, process. And so like those emotions, which can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, like games that really help us immerse ourselves so that we feel as though we can really connect and experience what's going on. Again, that safe way. There's so much power in it. And I think that we started so small decades ago with gaming, with like Duck Hunt and such, right? So now we can have complicated games that go into like in-depth like human relationships and grieving and just connecting in that way. So it's really cool to see how big an influence gaming can have in our lives.
It is. And I mean, now that, there's some of these games look like they're movies. Like I'm thinking The Last of Us.
Yes.
I haven't played the game, but I've
You would not
watched
like
the
it.
show. I know, I don't think I would like it, but I watched the show and I absolutely love the show. And then everyone was speaking about how like scene to scene, it was very identical to the game. And some people even mentioned, don't play like the second game if you don't want spoilers for the second season. But I watched a lot on YouTube, like they would put like a scene with the video game scene and it was literally like very, very close to it. And in that, like again, I just watched the show, but I'm imagining playing this game, doing this. Like I cried so much in the show. I can't imagine the emotions that playing the game like that, being this character that's on this mission, like just all of the emotions that can kind of come up from just playing that game. And so, yeah, I do think like there is, we can speak about like games really being a safe place to process some of those heavier emotions and some of the like story cut scenes, right? Like in Spider-Man, when you stop playing, Spider-Man's the only one that I can talk about.
That's okay.
But like with Spider-Man, when you're done like controlling this character, then it goes into story mode and it's like a little mini movie that's coming out. And there's so like graphics are crazy now. Like and like the characters' voices, so like actors that are portraying these characters, like there's so much detail and it just feels like you're watching this movie. So like these emotions are very real in that moment. And I think just like movies can sometimes help us, like video games can really help us like create a safe space for us to express these emotions in a way that feels okay for us or safe for us.
There's some really amazing AAA games out there where like the graphics are like phenomenal. The actors they get, some games will actually get like well-known actors and they'll actually do like mocap with them, so they'll actually film out scenes of games. Like I think Beyond Two Souls, they brought on Elliot Page prior to their transitioning, and they played one of the main characters, and like you can actually see that the character looks exactly like them and at that point. And like the phenomenal detail and like the music, they'll bring on like really good composers. So all of these variables combined make for a very atmospheric, emotional experience.
Yeah.
Very similar to film and television.
Yes.
Where I know you brought The Last of Us. For all of us who played the first and second game, like I think a lot of us who play the second one, we are excited for this season 2 to come out, but we're also terrified. Like I know I'm not ready for it because I know what's.
I'm not
happen.
ready, and I haven't played the game. I just after it left us in season 1, I'm like, this is gonna be intense.
There's some things I'm not looking forward to in
Yeah.
watching that show, but I know based off how they did such a beautiful job of honoring the game because it did come from the game.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see how they portray now the second game, and it's so different to observe something through television and film versus when you play in a game. You feel like you are there as part of the characters, like contributing, and you're bonding, you're connecting with them.
Yeah.
So there's a bit more involvement in that way, I find, and that's why I like more about gaming. If I have free time, I prefer to game versus to watch something because then I feel like I'm part of that world and that universe, and I'm included versus just being an observer in TV and film.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, I don't know why this popped up to me, but I'm imagining a sense of confidence that can come, like if we are feeling insecure in our real lives, but then we become this character in the game that we're playing, and we're doing all of these things that really help build our confidence. Like in that moment, we feel very confident in ourselves, and that can be like just a nice feeling to have if it's not something we normally feel on a day-to-day basis. But season 2 of The Last of Us is coming out soon, and I don't know if I'm ready. I do want to play the game, but I feel like I might get lightheaded.
I think that we would have to, well, have you do like some of the story elements and then the combat. Maybe I could sub in. And I
Okay.
could do that for you.
Let's do that.
There's some spooky elements to it.
Oh God.
But
well, the movie is scary. Even just the topic of the movie made me scared. Or the show and the game.
we'll do our own Let's Plays. We'll do like therapists that play these video games.
Yeah.
And then, we'll talk about it after.
We'll talk about it after. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm excited to play that game now. But yes, so there's a lot that we mentioned on like the benefits of video gaming. And I think too, in these communities when the communities are inclusive and welcoming and safe, there can, again, that can create a very rich atmosphere for us to feel included, for us to feel like, there are friendships, we are problem solving together. And a lot of that can help with some of the depressive symptoms that we have in our lives. And that can be the safe space that we go to feel seen.
Yeah, to be authentically ourselves.
Yeah.
To be able to learn more about ourselves. But also, like how you mentioned earlier, almost establishing that confidence. Where if I'm playing this character in a game who's like this hero character and they're filled with confidence and courage, sometimes I can have that mirroring happen where then I can start to act and feel more confident and courageous in my own life.
Yeah.
Because I've been able to practice and role play it here. And again, just transferring it out into the real world.
Yeah.
And even just seeing the evolution of gaming where now we have, VR, like virtual reality, like the Oculus, things at home that people can play in. And that's a whole other level of immersion in games, which I think we're seeing more happen. And I'm really curious how the gaming industry will evolve into where you feel like you're physically in the game and you're moving around. And I'm curious how that could be used from like a therapeutic standpoint.
Oh my
of,
goodness,
like,
yeah.
navigating big emotions or phobias, like stuff like that.
Yeah, even just like experiential therapy, right? Like when we experience a big trauma, it can be really hard to go back to anywhere close to the scene. I actually was just talking to somebody about like the PTSD or like the physical reaction that our body can have if we are driving on the road that we used to take when we were, taking somebody for an emergency like surgery or care, or a child, or we got in a car accident. Driving past that can be really challenging. And in this, like, again, this virtual world, virtual reality, we're able to actually be in that place with our clients. So there's so much benefits that could happen from that.
Yeah, so I'm really curious, like the potential and the growth that can happen through gaming. And I'm sure there's a lot of research already being done in it. But I'm curious to see how things can become very specific. Because even like some therapeutic approaches, like we might use like imaginal exposures where we imagine that we're there. But I'm curious how powerful it'd be to use like VR in a way to almost be like the next step, as opposed to then if we're not ready to go into that actual location.
Yeah.
So So I guess we'll have to see.
I guess we will have to see. I think it's important for us to end with boundaries because we did speak about the benefits, but also the harm of video games. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important that we have some balance, that we have some self boundary and self control when we are in these environments that obviously are a lot of benefits, but we want it to stay beneficial and not cause us so much harm and distance. So, what are some boundaries that you feel are important for gamers to know?
I think like some can be how much time do we invest in gaming, as long as it's not impacting like our functionality of getting other things done and accomplished. I think that's good to be mindful of. Also, like what environments are we exposing ourselves in gaming?
Yeah.
If I'm going to be in an environment that's really toxic in an online community, what can I do to minimize that exposure? Whether it's muting people on the team, trying to avoid looking at the chat, trying to withdraw from certain things that can be negative for us. Also, what kind of games that we play. If we find that, we enjoy some of those scarier, more intense gaming, but we find that those can keep us late up at night, being mindful, when do I slot this in? Do I
Yeah.
play it right before bed? Or maybe it's harder to fall asleep and I might have nightmares. Or should I maybe slot that in at a different time where pacing is okay for me to decompress afterwards?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the boundary of time and like limit your hours of playing a game, I feel like that can be the big one. Or even just putting in some breaks so that we're
Yeah.
able to do a quick scan on, how are we feeling? Are we hungry? How long have we been playing this game?
Yeah.
Am I good to stop here? Did I miss a whole bunch of phone calls from people that are wanting to actually see me in real life? Like kind of just having those moments to check in. But I do appreciate the boundary of community when it's become toxic or when there is a lot of bullying that's happening. It's important for us to take care of ourselves. And sometimes that means muting it or, not having the online chatting option. I don't know if that's a thing that you can do, but turning that feature off, just so you can, prioritize your mental health, your emotional well-being while you're still doing this thing that you enjoy.
Yeah. And I also like to kind of go back to it. I like how Brene Brown, she talks about how play is very important for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, and we see it so much in children. We encourage play. But for adults, we forget that we also need play.
Yeah.
And play is part of the antidote to stress. And so kind of I like to view gaming as a way of engaging in play, to have fun, to hopefully help reduce stress and connect with others and our own creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I feel like there's so much more I want to talk about video games. We might need to play The Last of Us and then do this again. I have to get my motion sickness in check for some of the games that I have wanted to try. But yeah, I guess we talked a lot about like mental health and how like the benefits on our emotional and our mental health, but I feel like there's a lot of physical factors that are helpful. Like with my kiddos, the hand-eye coordination has been really helpful for them, even learning and figuring out like how to how to like do the Spider-Man's whips and actually swing through there. You have to hit the button at a specific time so that you don't fall all the way down. Like there is a lot of those skills that can, help or that we get an opportunity to practice when we're playing video games. Another one is in Mario Party, like you are able to kind of shake the remote around for some of the games and then you're actually doing an action. So there is some of that hand-eye coordination that happens.
Oh yeah. Like I think, I haven't done research on myself and my brain here, but I think that my reflexes are actually pretty good. And I want to think gaming is accrue to that. Just like with the
it's
quick
helpful,
time
right?
events, right? Like you have to hit this button at this time and be very aware of what's going on. It can be a very good mindfulness exercise in that regard.
And you're multitasking.
Which for a lot of folks, that takes a lot of work to master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're having to you have to hide while you're also trying to shoot at these Venom. Me and my Spider-Man, that's all I got. But while you're trying to shoot at Venom, like you need to hide and you need to swing and you need to do all of these things, which can be overwhelming at the time. But again, in a controlled environment, so you can accomplish that and feel safe about it without too much, risk.
Yeah, so it's like not just like the emotional, but like we can see like the physical elements and some physical benefits with gaming just in terms of the brain and sharpening different skill set.
Yeah. Again, we could go on and on. I just had to add that last thing.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of those games. Were there any other games that you didn't get a chance to share that you want to suggest to people?
One game that I have so many favorite games.
Yeah.
But one game that's always stuck out with me, it's a fun, single player game, if you like space exploration, but there's a lot of existential elements to it that I enjoy and make you kind of reflect more about life, and it's called Outer Wilds.
Okay.
I love the game so much, and my partner, he also really enjoys it. That actually, the main theme song from that from that game, I used that in my wedding when I walked down the aisle, just because, again, the huge nerd and wanting to pay homage to it.
Yeah.
But there's so many games I could list out that are like really enjoyable or connecting. But that's the game I'll just throw right now, Outer Wilds.
Outer Wilds. And what console?
That's probably, I know it's for PC because I played it on the computer. I don't know if it's on consoles, but it's been out for a while, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it's out on like something else, but that's all I know at this time.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise on video games. And I apologize to our listeners that I'm only talking about Spider-Man.
That's we love Spider-Man.
Mario
here.
Kart. Well, we do. We are big Spider-Man
Yes, we are.
fans and nerds in the Marvel Universe. But thank you so much. Have fun playing and gaming. Remember to be safe with that and check on those boundaries. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.